Welcome to the end of Batman Black Mirror. Now, if you don't know where you are, you're currently on the Comicstorian channel. This is where we do the complete story series. We break down your favorite comic books and stories into digestible bites, and then we read them dramatically back to you, adding in music and different voices, basically. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, this is the last part of our 4-part series for Black Mirror. Black Mirror is the first story that Scott Snyder did that really took him into the fame of writing Batman storylines. But what you may not know is this is during the period when Dick Grayson was actually Batman. You see, during Final Crisis, Bruce Wayne actually was thought to be dead. Dick Grayson took over as Batman, and this is during that period where right after Batman returned, Dick Grayson stayed as Batman so that Bruce could go and put the idea of Batman around the entire world. In our last video, Dick narrowly escaped from Tiger Shark after being captured and taken to his underwater base. After meeting with James Gordon, Jim Gordon's son, Dick had learned that his case had deliberately been thrown in the wrong direction. As Dick goes to follow up on that lead, James Gordon returned to the home of Ben Wolf to finish torturing and mutilating him for picking on him when they were children. You see, James is Jim Gordon's psychotic son, who has had a history of killing and mutilating people. But he's supposedly back. Everything's good. He's been cured. So as the night set in over Arkham Asylum, Jim Gordon went to go visit Dr. Leslie Tompkins to find out about the progress that his son has been making about fitting back into society. Leslie tells him that James has been a huge help to them in the past few days with everything that's been going on. He even volunteered to help with the nutrition runs. Jim thinks about it, and Leslie then asks, what does Barbara think about all of this? He tells her that Babs doesn't buy into any of it for a second, but she's working on accepting it. Through the doorway, James walks in asking, working on what? Leslie says getting his old workhorse of a father to try and enjoy himself at his old age. Like, maybe getting a hobby. James smiles, saying that having hobbies does help. But before the conversation can go much further, Leslie mentions that she's got to get back to work, and Jim says that he needs to as well. Before leaving, James stops Jim, telling him that it was great for him to stop by, and Jim nods and walks off. A short while later, over in Barbara's office, Jim tells her that they should probably talk. Barbara says that she's already said her piece, unless he's thinking that their little visit showed James can be a real Boy Scout helping out all over the place. Jim says that that's right, which is why he took one of the pills that James takes from his desk. He wants to find out what it is. And as he hands the pill over to Barbara, he says that it's the pill that he's been taking to treat his psychopathy. It's still in trial phases, but it's supposed to help a person experience empathy. He wants her to do it, test it, find out if James can be a good boy. Barbara then asks why not just have Dick go over it. And Jim says because this is between their family now. It's their blood. Back at Arkham, a doctor begins to transport Joker to his cell. And the Joker starts to tell the doctor all about his life. How the man's wife is always sick, but they go to the Gotham Avery. The doctor grabs Joker asking, what is he doing? How is it that he could know about his sick wife? And as he talks, he begins to trail off. One of the security guards grabs the doctor, telling him to step back, but as he does, the doctor begins to laugh. And another guard shouts that there must be something secreting from the Joker's skin. And just as he does, the doctor grabs a scalpel, slicing through the guard's neck. Back at Barbara's office, she begins to read over the results of the test and says that the formula has been inverted. These pills are not designed to stimulate activity, but it's meant to suppress it. Jim says that that would mean that these pills are designed to turn people into, and Barbara finishes his sentence telling him, psychopaths, like my brother. Jim then asks what could his plan be then, and Barbara mentions that he wouldn't be able to just dump it into the waters, it would get filtered out, and even if he did, the potency would be too weak to affect adult brains. Children though. Suddenly, a horrible look falls over Jim's face, and he realizes that James has been doing the nutrition runs for the hospital. He'll be passing these pills out in the baby formula. He's going to poison Gotham's children. Jim rushes down to his car and he speeds all the way down to James's apartment. And as he gets there, Jim kicks in the door and he shouts for James to show himself with his gun in his hand. And he finds no one home. While searching through the apartment, Jim finds a small box in the closet and he begins to open it up. And shortly after that, Harvey walks in telling Jim that they got something. Joker's out. But Jim doesn't answer, and Harvey asks if everything's okay. As Jim pulls out Bess's bat-charmed key, he tells him no. Nothing's okay. Jim rushes back to his car and he calls to his wife, Barbara, to tell her what's going on. He frantically tells her to stay inside. The Joker has escaped and he's probably going to target them. Barbara then asks why would he do that, and Jim shouts because the Joker always comes after them. Just stay inside until the hotel security comes. And as he says it, there's a knock at the door and Barbara says that it's them. Jim tells her, good, go with them. He's pulling up now. And as the door opens, Jim hears a loud crash. He runs up the stairs asking what's going on, and then the phone disconnects. He reaches Barbara's room and he breaks the door and shouting for her her, but he only sees blood on the shower curtain. He grips the curtain and he pulls it open to find Barbara naked in the tub, blood dripping from her mouth. A short while later, over at the Wayne crime lab, Dick explains that Barbara is in critical condition and they've halted the toxin's progression. Now, all that is left to do is carefully extract the toxin while making sure that she doesn't go into shock. After a few moments, Babs says that she'll check in on the hour, but before leaving, Jim says that it's possible that the Joker may come after her as well. Babs waits for a moment and says that she won't be hiding. This time, when he knocks on the door, she'll be waiting. Once Barbara, Jim's wife, is set, Dick suits up and goes to meet Harvey, who is on the scene with another doctor affected by the toxin. Harvey says that they all know that this toxin has been slipped into the guy's food, and that the toxin is a highly toxic and saturated formula. As to how he got it, Dick says that the Joker would have had to ingest it, and with its potency, it would have been able to seep through his pores, literally making him deadly to the touch. But while the two talk, Tim radios in, stating that they ran some tests on the toxin, and they found something strange. Joker used more than 50 versions of it, but they only found one on Joker, and the one on Barbara Sr. was the oldest. Dick says that the toxicity of it would have had to have been extremely high to make his sweat, and then Tim stops him, telling him that's the thing, this formula is actually less deadly than some of the more recent ones, and he sends over the data. Once the data hits, Dick begins to scan the area for traces of the toxin, and he sees a set of handprints going over to the storm drain into the sewers. Dick radios back that he's on the Joker's trail, judging by the potency levels of the toxin left behind. But while Dick tries to tell him that he's running into a dead end, the radio starts to break up. Dick touches the wall, telling them all that the Joker lives by his own maps, and he pushes the wall and he opens up, and he finishes stating, "So does Batman." As Dick pushes the false wall, he walks into the crypt beneath the old church, and he calls out to the Joker, telling him, "You can't hide." Off in a corner, Joker shouts, "Of course not! Everyone knows that bats can see in the dark, so let there be light!" He pulls a cord, filling the room with a blinding light, causing Dick's night vision to blind him. Joker then dances around Dick, telling him, "You're not my bat! My bat had wings of flesh, and you smell more like feathers!" And then the Joker grabs a scalpel and he says, "I suppose you'll have to do for now." And he starts cutting into Dick. The further that he cuts, the more that Dick beats him, and the Joker shouts, "You are not my bat! Only that one can hurt me!" Dick catches the next swing, and he tells him that he gets an A for effort, and he punches Joker to the ground. He shouts that he will stop hurting the Gordons, and the Joker laughs. "I didn't do anything! Only the real Batman would know my work. I miss him so much, so do me a favor and tell the real bats to come home. Please, pretty please." Dick shouts for him to stop, and the Joker continues, telling him, "It wasn't me! It wasn't me!" And just then, Dick begins to think, if the Joker wasn't spreading the toxin, who could it be? Back in the crime lab, Barbara Sr. rips off her bandages, screaming, "It was him!" And over in Babs' office, Babs starts tracking surveillance on James. And just as she thinks that she's found him, James appears behind her, asking, "Are you happy to see me?" And he grabs her. Later that night, Dick and Jim stand by the bat signal to look at Barbara's empty wheelchair. Jim says that all of the defenses have been expended, the gas, the stun charge. She even tried to fight him off. And Dick looks at the discoloration while Jim says that it's blood. Barbara's blood, if she's lost this much already. Without looking back, Dick tells him that they will find him. Elsewhere in the city, James steps out of the shadows, asking Barbara if she likes it. He figured that they would take a stroll down memory lane. Barbara says that when they find him, he won't ever see the light of day again. And James leans down, telling her, "It's funny, I've been having trouble being afraid of something like that. In fact, the only time that I've ever been close to being scared was the day that I met you. It was the day that our father introduced us. It was like you were able to see the bad in me." James then asks, "When were you able to tell? Like, really tell?" And Barbara tells him that it was when he hurt that bus driver. James leans back, stating, "That's right. She called me Four Eyes. But how did you even know that it was me?" Barbara tells him it was how he hurt her. 2 razor blades taped to a matchbox so that when it was opened, the cuts would be too close to stitch. So it was done by someone who wanted to hurt and torture them. James stands silent and tells her, "I'm real good. So why don't you go ahead and take a look at your legs?" James pulls the blanket off of her legs, revealing 2 knives stabbed into each of them. He grabs the handles, wiggling them, telling her that they're nice and tight, right next to your ephemeral arteries. So if you pull one out, you'll bleed out in a matter of minutes. In fact, I told the Joker all about you, how my sister was always in a rush to be the hero. And I said that it might be a good idea to slow her down a bit. James goes on, telling her, "I didn't realize that it would actually come to your house. And, well, it's just something that I wanted to apologize for years now." Barbara looks at him and says that it can't be true. He's lying about that, and James laughs. "You're right. Just the look on your face, though." Barbara then says that she thought he would look different than all the other villains in Gotham. She figured he would just appear in her bedroom one night and strangle her, but instead he's like everyone else, just sitting there gloating, keeping her alive. Barbara then sees a flash as James rips one of the knives out, and he says that, "You're right. But this time, it's not about you. It's about him! Up in the skies, Dick flies the Batjet trying to locate a cellular signal. And as he talks with Tim, the radio suddenly cuts out. A voice tells him, "Hello?" And Dick shouts, "Who is this?" James tells him, "It's me, but this is Dick, right?" It's hard to tell with that strange voice that you use when you're Batman. But anyway, thanks to Barbara's computers, there's no way that you can trace me. You were always a person to wear your heart on your sleeve. You were generally a nice guy. But for me, it was different. Like any other kid, I stopped worrying about what people thought about me and just accepted it. It was last year that I could tell that Barbara was looking for me, and that was when I tucked myself away in a clinical trial for people like me. Really, I just wanted to know if the medication would work, and sure enough, it did. But that's the thing, I felt empathy. But that's when I learned that empathy is humans' greatest weakness. There wasn't anything wrong with me, it was everyone else who had a problem. That's the time that Gotham gave me a sign, a report that Batman had returned. But he was smiling while stopping the criminals. At that moment, I knew it wasn't Bruce, it was you. And that's when I came to Gotham. The plan was simple enough. Hire some kids to let the birds loose, sneak in with the dealer's people, and actually I was the one who saved you when you fell off the roof that night. All it took was a distraction to make everyone think that it was the Joker. That way I could usher in a new generation of children. True children. No empathy. Dick tells him, "That's unfortunate because they already found out about your plans to spike the baby punches." Jim asks him, "Are you sure about that? How do you know that I haven't already done it?" They don't know. So in a decade or two, we're gonna see what Gotham looks like. But all of that aside, I've come here to challenge you. In a moment, I'm going to kill my sister. And before leaving town, I'm gonna kill my father. The real Batman would soldier on. But you? I think you're just gonna give up because too many of your friends died. James then says, "If you'll excuse me, I have someone to kill." And then as he looks back, Barbara's already gone. James shouts, "That's the spirit, hide and seek!" Though I must warn you, I'm pretty good at this game. James walks forward, and then from the shadows, Barbara lunges up, taking the other knife in her leg and slamming it into James's eye. James's body falls to the ground, and then he looks at her, telling her that she really shouldn't have done that. She should have just told him that she wanted to play tag. Barbara starts to crawl away, but James inches closer and closer, telling her, "I got you now." And then a voice asks if he can play too, and that's when Dick punches James in the stomach. Dick runs over to Barbara, and she asks, "How did you know?" And Dick says, "It was when we met up for lunch the other day. I put a tracer on him. He may be soft, but he's not stupid." Barbara weakly tells him, "You can't let him get away." And Dick tells her not to worry. He's about to have a Gotham moment. Outside, James stands up shouting, "Freedom!" And then a gun is fired. James falls to the ground and the bullet hits his leg, and Jim tells him, "Not this time, son." James shouts for him to wait, and Jim tells him no, and he fires into his other leg, and as James tries to get back up, he trips over and falls off the ledge. Jim runs over, reaching for his arm, telling him, "I'm not letting you go." And the next morning, Jim visits Dick as he starts to take down the crime lab. Dick mentions that it's sad that there were no takers on this, but it was just wishful thinking. Jim stops him, telling him that he came here to thank him on all fronts for what he's done for them. Dick smiles, telling him that he's welcome, and Jim asks about that other thing. Dick says that they ran tests on the baby formula and they couldn't find any trace, so if it was done, it would have been done long ago, like James said, though it's very unlikely. Jim shouts, stating it's still possible, and Dick tells him, yeah, there's still a chance. Dick goes on saying how he's hesitant about setting his roots here, knowing how cruel this city could be. But after seeing all of these terrible things, he knows this is where he needs to be. Jim tells him he really hopes he sticks around this time, and Dick tells him yeah, because selling a 4,000-foot office space isn't going to be easy anyway. Jim laughs, telling him that it looks like they're both in it for the long haul. All that's left to do is hang their hats, belly up at a bar, and be ready for what comes next. Now this wraps our first Throwback Thursday series. I do want to apologize. We did have some big gaps in the middle of this one. It wasn't intended. We had some weird scheduling issues that happened in May and late April, so that's what happened there. We're probably going to take a week off of Throwback Thursday, but when we come back, we're going to tell you the classic story about Bart Allen, the Flash, and what happened to him within his 13 issues. I hope you guys enjoy that. Subscribe to find out what happened to that original Flash, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Comicstorian, and I'll tell you guys about whatever you want.